The 2023 September Apple event just finished up with multiple new products announced, and honestly, there were a few hits and a bunch of misses in terms of what was rumored to be coming. Some folks were expecting a lot from this event, and while it may have been light on the upgrades compared to what was being anticipated, in my opinion, there's still some really great features and specs that were announced this year. Today, I want to dive into this event a little deeper and try and cut through some of the marketing material and sort through what is going to have a big impact, and on the flip side, what isn't. So if you want to catch up on this year's Apple event, or you're just interested in any of the new Apple gear, stick around and let's get into it. Hey everyone, Kyle Erickson here. September is when tech season really starts ramping up with new products, and that usually begins with an Apple event like the one that just happened this week, where, like usual, we saw new iPhones, some watches, and a bit of an upgrade to AirPods as well. I want to start off with the AirPods because it was probably one of the most underwhelming products, and then just work our way up through everything else. There was a brief mention of the AirPods case getting updated to USB-C, which is a welcome update for anyone who wants a set and plans to use wired charging. I know for me personally, because the AirPods can charge wirelessly with a regular wireless charger, a watch charger, or MagSafe, this really doesn't make any difference for me, and I suspect that's pretty common for most people who own these. Other than that, they're the same old AirPods, so nothing too notable there, but things start to get a little more interesting when we get into the watches. There were quite a lot of rumors when it came to the watches, from having different sensors to improve battery life, new wideband chips, and so on. And some of those came to fruition and some missed the mark. The Series 9 watch still has the same advertised battery life, and there wasn't really any mention of improved or changed sensors, but there are improvements with the S9 chip that has an advertised 60% more transistors, 30% faster GPU than the S8, and comes with a bunch of improvements to the neural engine. I suspect that updates to the neural engine will actually make the existing sensors work better, and Siri should technically be a little bit better as well, as things like dictation are now processed on the watch versus in the cloud, so I'm expecting we'll get a little bit better Siri functionality. Something really cool that they showed off with the Apple Watch is the double tap gesture, where you can tap your thumb and your index finger together and the watch will read the movement in your wrist to perform certain actions like answering calls or pausing or playing music. If this works as advertised, I think this could be a very useful feature, and I could see this tying into the Vision Pro somewhere down the line. The interesting thing will be how well this works in the real world and making sure it doesn't pick up false positives, but until people get this into their hands for an extended period of time, the jury is still out there. Ultra wideband was updated with a U2 chip as anticipated, so that means that you're likely going to see better location services if you're doing things like running or using Find My, things like that. From a design aspect, things look pretty much the same. There is a new pink color, double the screen brightness at 2000 nits on that screen, but overall, I'd say there's just a few noteworthy things there. It might not be worth it if you picked up a Series 8 in the last year or so, but for someone like me who's still rocking a Series 6, I think there's enough to justify the upgrade. With my Series 6, the battery is degraded to the point where it's kind of annoying and I've got to charge it more frequently than I'd like, so I've actually just gone ahead and already ordered the Series 9. I'm going to try and buy most of the stuff that was announced this year and review it, including both the iPhone 15 and the 15 Pro, so stay tuned for those, and make sure you're subscribed if you want to see some more in-depth analysis and comparisons with those devices. Just coming back to the watch, there were a few other bands announced in line with the whole carbon neutral theme that seemed to dominate the event. And as far as the Apple Watch Ultra is concerned, that is basically the same watch as last year, just with an upgraded S9 chip and a new display. That display gets up to 3000 nits peak brightness, which is kind of wild. I'm not sure that I've ever seen a display of any kind get that bright before, but that was really the sole highlight for me. I know that there was rumors about new colors, but that wasn't mentioned at all, and outside of that display, you're essentially getting the same watch from last year with the same battery life, just with those added features of the S9 chip. I'm gonna leave the watches at that because I'm assuming what most people are interested in are the phones, and there's a lot to unpack there. On the iPhone 15, we've got new color options like we always do. There's black, green, yellow, blue, and pink, so there's no white this year, which I think is kind of unfortunate. I'm honestly not a fan of anything but black here. Everything else is just a little bit too dull or muted in my opinion, and I would have liked to have seen at least one solid color option there. The body on the 15 has rounded edges, and they've gone away a little bit from the square look. The biggest addition visually, I'd say, is the dynamic island that was introduced on the Pro last year, and you're gonna get a nice bright display as well with a peak brightness of 2000 nits. This isn't gonna be ProMotion or anything like that, that, but outside of that, and it being aluminum and the missing telephoto lens on the back, this is essentially the Pro model from last year. There's an ultra-wide sensor there, which they didn't mention too much, but the main camera is a 48 megapixel sensor, so you get the same 2x zoom feature that you have on the 14 Pro, so this does act more like a 3-lens camera in that sense. It's got that same A16 chip from the 14 Pro, but there are a few upgrades with that U2 wideband chip for location services, the addition of USB-C charging that tops out at the same 480 megabits per second speed that last year's model did. Honestly, I think that this might be the best deal out of any of the products announced this year and will probably be a really solid phone for a lot of people. Moving to the 15 Pro, you have a new titanium material with a brushed metal look, so we're getting away from the polished chrome look, which I'm 100% on board with. I just find that the glossy sides of the iPhone 14 Pro and the previous generations that have that gloss look are dust and fingerprint collectors, and this brushed look is probably going to be a lot nicer in that regard. The color options there are white, black, blue, and natural titanium. I like these a lot more than the regular 15, and I think I'll probably end up getting the natural titanium myself. Some other important things with the design: because the Pro is using titanium this year instead of stainless steel, it's going to be a lot lighter. On Apple's site, it's listed at 187 grams, where last year's Pro was 206. That might not seem like a lot, but I can guarantee you it's going to feel a lot lighter in your hand. I don't know about anyone else, but once I slap a case on my phone and I'm using it daily, my pinky finger gets fatigued just due to how I hold my phone. And I do prefer the lightness of the regular aluminum iPhone, which is 171 grams. So this is getting pretty close to being on par there. Also, just like the Apple Watch Ultra, we now have an action button that replaces the mute switch on the Pro. Again, for me, this is a welcome change because the only time that I ever touch that mute switch is when I'm changing cases and it knocks it off of mute. And this action button does give you a few more options in terms of customizing it and changing functionality. I think the example Apple gave was recording voice memos and using shortcuts or the camera, but I'm sure that I'll be able to find a use that's better than just a mute switch. The main camera on the Pro is still 48 megapixels, but the actual sensor itself is larger, so that should result in better images. There's also supposed to be reduced lens flares, and there's a bunch of new features in the software for different focal lengths, with Apple saying it's the equivalent of having 7 different camera lenses. I'm a little bit curious about that because to me there's still only 3 lenses on the back, so with those different focal lengths, it looks a little more like they're just cropping the images to simulate those lengths. In order to truly get a different focal length, it's also going to have to change perspective somehow a little bit, and that's just going to be a wait and see for me. There's up to a 5x telephoto lens that you can only get with a Pro Max this year, which I'm on the fence about. I was talking about this with a few other people, and the images that they showed in the marketing material honestly weren't great, so it makes me wonder what this is actually going to look like straight out of the phone. So I think that I'll likely just stick with the 15 Pro and the 3x zoom there. With that said, one of the coolest things in my opinion that will probably not affect anyone but creators and camera nerds is the ability to record ProRes video at 4K 60 frames per second to external storage. This is actually pretty crazy because a lot of the prosumer mirrorless cameras can't even do this, and that makes this really the ideal phone for content creation in my opinion. Part of why you're able to do that is because, again, this has a USB-C port, but unlike the 15, this can push speeds up to 10 gigabits per second. Those aren't the Thunderbolt speeds that were rumored, but it's still more than enough to run these little T7 Samsung drives. One thing that I was kind of surprised with on that USB-C port is there's no mention of upgrades to fast charging or frankly anything related to battery life at all. The iPhone 14 Pro's issues with battery life and battery health were pretty well documented, so I do find it a bit odd that that wasn't really addressed in the keynote. I know I was expecting some kind of announcement with battery life and power consumption being better, especially with the A17 Pro chip that's in here. I say that because this chip is built on a 3nm process, which essentially means that the components in this chip are a lot smaller, and that usually translates into better battery life, but if they didn't bring it up in the event, I don't think that we should expect any drastic improvements. That A17 chip is supposed to be marginally better in CPU speed with about a 10% increase in performance, and it does have a redesigned GPU that has hardware-enabled ray tracing that is supposed to be about 20% faster than last year. They showed this off a bunch with gaming, but I know personally I don't really play games at all on my phone, so that really isn't something that concerns me, and probably most folks for that matter, but if you do, you will like likely notice a difference there. Like the Apple Watch, the Neural Engine is supposed to be a lot better on the phones as well, and do a lot of the dictation and Siri functionality on the device versus in the cloud. So hopefully that will make Siri better. Again, I wouldn't hold out hope for Siri becoming good at anything. Speaking of the cloud and networking, one upgrade that wasn't surprising, considering almost every other Apple device is switching to it, is the inclusion of Wi-Fi 6E, which I'm a huge fan of. I have this on my Mac Studio and my iPad Pro, and there is quite a difference in wireless speed and performance, so I'm really looking forward to testing that out. Finally, the event closed out talking about the addition of spatial video that will work with the Vision Pro headset, where multiple camera lenses will combine to create a 3D video, solving this whole awkward experience of people having to record things like birthdays with a goofy headset on. There were a few nods to the Vision Pro this year, and I think we're likely going to see more and more of that as that product develops. As far as these products go though, there's definitely a lot of smaller incremental improvements this year in all these devices, which is pretty common at these events, but I think there are some potentially impactful ones that folks will notice in everyday use, depending on how you use your AirPods, your Apple Watch, or your iPhone. With that said, out of everything announced this year and all these features, I'd love to know, what are you looking forward to the most? Do you think Apple made any mistakes this year or missed anything that this should have been included in here? Let me know in the comments down below. Like I said, I'll be picking up a bunch of this gear, so definitely stay tuned for that, and we can test out all these different claims and see how things actually perform. That is it for me today. I hope you found this video useful or entertaining. If you did, feel free to hit that like button. If you want to see more tech-related content or take turns telling a story, one word at a time, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next upload.